Hey everyone, welcome back to the bench. Today we'll be doing a restoration video on this Rico-cut N-33H Rondine. This turntable was donated to me along with several other pieces of vintage stereo equipment, including a Sherwood S7702 tube stereo, which I believe this unit was paired with. It was likely produced somewhere between the late 1950s and early 1960s. While ROK-H series Rondine tables were popular for broadcasters because of their quiet and reliable motors and simplicity to maintain, this one was used for some time as a home turntable and then was put in storage and has sat for roughly the last 30 years untouched. For a turntable its age, it's in relatively good condition, except for being, a little bit on the dirty side. Sadly, however, the Tonearm was destroyed while it sat in storage. There's pitting all over the Tonearm itself. The head shell is cracked and bent at the front, as is the support system for the counterweight on the back of the Tonearm. To that end, the plan is going to be not only to restore this turntable, but to make a few improvements upon it. Because of the condition of the Tonearm, I've opted to replace it with a new S320 Mark II Tonearm, which is similar in size and shape to the original, but also adds features that the original didn't have, including an arm lift system and anti-skate. Aside from that, we also need to do some work to the motor. The motor mounts are old and decrepit. I have some replacements for those. I also have a replacement for the original turntable belt, which itself is pretty old and decrepit. Fortunately, the turntable bearing seems to be in really good condition lubrication-wise. It's still spinning very freely, so I don't think we're going to need to do anything with that. I do want to sand down the original plinth though, and refinish it in a darker stain. This is golden oak finish, and it's really just not my taste. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a teardown and a cleanup of the parts. We're going to sand and refinish the plinth. We're going to install new motor damper grommets. We're going to install new capacitors and do a little bit of rewiring. We're going to design and print up new feet and a new capacitor holder for the motor filter capacitor. Going to measure out, do a little bit of modification, and install the new Tonearm. Install the new cartridge on the new Tonearm, and do some calibration and adjustment of the Tonearm, and then we'll be ready to test. So let's get to it. Okay, and to make sure the lubrication stays good on this and that we don't have to do anything extra with it, I'm going to go ahead and retake or put the turntable back inside the bearing housing so they sit together and nothing gets in there. Okay, now it's going to be time to unwire the original Tonearm wiring from the back and then remove the base from the plinth. Oh yeah, you can see just how old and decrepit the wiring's gotten. So we're going to unscrew all the RCA wiring here, and then we're going to remove the terminal tie strip from the back of the plinth so that we can remove the base from the plinth. Okay, on the underside here you can really see there's not a whole lot to these. We have the pilot light for the on-off switch. We have the on-off switch and a capacitor tied between the two terminals on that. We have the original motor filter capacitor. We have the hysteresis synchronous motor that came with this. And we have the bottom side of the Tonearm with all of its original wiring. So obviously all this wiring in this Tonearm is going to come out. The original wiring that goes down here is still in relatively good condition, so we're going to try and keep that, but we definitely need to replace this motor filter cap. So the next thing I think we'll do is remove this and try and desolder the wiring for the motor and then pull the motor out so that we can work on it. Okay, so the next thing we want to do here is remove the motor so that we can work on getting that rehabbed and also get the filter capacitor out of the line here so that we can go ahead and replace that. The capacitor itself isn't polarized, but obviously the motor itself is, and if we wire it back in backwards from how it's wired now, it'll turn the wrong way. We don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is I've tracked the wiring, and it looks like the hot end is on this side. So we're going to go ahead and mark this with a black Sharpie mark so we know which way to wire things back in when we put the new filter capacitor in. And then we'll go ahead and very gingerly melt the solder on this and remove the wiring. So we're going to take our Sharpie, just make a nice black mark here so we can see what we're doing. And this wire is the wire for the motor itself. Okay. Go ahead and tin up our soldering iron a pinch. Should be nice and hot already. Oh, interesting. Didn't even have to desolder the motor wire because apparently that wasn't soldered in properly, or the solder's gotten so crusted that it just popped right out. we go. There's the other end. We can take that off. Alright, now we have the capacitor out of the loop. And we should be able to take off the screw and get the capacitor out of here. You'll see now that the old capacitor, the strap is permanently affixed to the housing on this, so we're not going to be able to reuse that, which is why I mentioned that we're going to need to design and print a replacement holder for the new capacitor to attach it to this mount point. And interestingly, when I got the capacitor out, discovered that they'd connected in red directly in with the motor wiring. I expected to find that on the other side of the capacitor, but it wasn't, so I'm going to have to go and hunt down the schematic or the wiring diagram on the original manual and double check how this is wired up so that I make sure I'm wiring things back up the right way when I put it back together. Okay, I went and did a little bit of digging through the service manual, and it does show how everything's wired together. Unfortunately, there's no electrical schematic explaining why everything's wired together the way it is, so I'm going to have to sit down and draw that out myself to try and get inside the heads of the engineers that put this together. In the meantime, though, I'd like to get this motor off of here so I can get it worked on and get the Tonearm and the rest of the wiring off of here so that I can clean up the base. So to that end, I went and removed the electrical wire nut from the red wire that was on the motor here and tied into one side of the line cord. And we'll just go ahead and reuse that when we're done. So let's go ahead and get the motor off of here, and then we'll remove the Tonearm. Okay, and set that aside. Now we need to remove the motor mount so that we can work on cleaning up the base, and then we'll go ahead and remove the Tonearm. Alright, the mount's off. Let's make sure we don't lose the screw or that spring. We'll need to clean this part up too. Let's go ahead and get the Tonearm off now. Alright, so the Tonearm, in order to get that off, first we're going to have to remove this screw, and it's slightly out of frame. That is okay. It's just a screw that helps hold the line cord on. I'm going to just undo that far enough to get the wire out. There we go. I will do my best to keep this in frame. This will be a little interesting. I've got a jeweler size flathead on one side, and then looks like a nut on the other. Don't even need the wrench for that one. And 3. Perfect. Now I just need to snip the wires off of the terminal tie strip and pull them through, and we're set to go. Okay, so we've got everything pulled off the base now, except for the power switch and the pilot light. I opted to leave those on simply because the way that the light's installed, I was worried that removing it would destroy the plastic housing and I'd have to go hunt down another one. So we're just going to go ahead and leave that there and work around it. I don't see anything on here that would indicate a large grease buildup or anything. So we're going to work with a damp, soapy washcloth to try and get all the grime off of this and use another towel to dry it off. Oh yeah, that is looking like it's working out quite well. Probably have to make a few passes at this to get it completely clean, but we'll go ahead and keep going at that, and when I'm finished, we'll be back. The cleaning is now done, and as you can see from the pictures, everything cleaned up quite nicely. There was a yellow substance that wasn't coming off with soap and water on the motor cover and the bladder. I ended up using isopropyl alcohol to clean those parts, and it did come right off. Now that the cleaning is done, we're going to use the next video to do some work on the motor, design and printing for the missing parts, and sanding and refinishing the plinth. The video after that will be dedicated to getting the new Tonearm installed and reassembly of the unit. Thanks for watching.